Everybody has been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, and we could still help through the NFL Draft-a-thon charity. Donations can be made through Wednesday night, so you can get involved and make a difference. For more information, resources, and details on how to support nonprofits providing relief for those significantly impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, visit NFL.com/relief. Let's get to the show.
The Around the NFL podcast. Doesn't know which day of the week it is.
Welcome to another edition of the Around the NFL podcast. My name is Dan Hansis, and I'm joined in a city filled with heroes still in bunkers. We're up to 31, folks. Mark Sessler, Chris Wesley, Greg Rosenthal. What's up, boys?
Hey, Dan.
Well, I should say, this is the 31st Bunker Cast, but according to one tabulation, this is the 1,000th Around the NFL podcast episode.
Hey, now.
How about that?
Well, we are blowing it out, as you can see. All the, when you think 1,000th episode, this is what it looks like.
I turned 40 in the bunker, and it's only fitting that another milestone hits now where we're in this state. Mark, did you ever think we'd get to 1,000 episodes?
Well, I mean, at various points, I thought different things. Not when we started, but just because that seemed like no shows last that long. I mean, how many podcasts in our own media house have come and gone? We've outlived them, and
shots fired.
When we got to about 600 or so, I thought, well, unless one of us was assassinated or taken out, we're gonna do it. And we've had some run-ins on that front too, but we're pushing on.
Plenty of people have been assassinated.
I'm also feeling like a crazy
company.
person right now, so I don't.
Well, famously, you've talked a lot about getting assassinated by a female. That you always specify that.
The fleet of
comes up. I said it comes up more often now, so that is a bit of a concern.
Oh, I definitely want that to happen.
Well, we made it.
That's not changed.
We made it, and we had Mark along for the whole ride. And Ricky Hollywood, you've been with us for, I'd estimate, in the range of 200 shows or so now. So you must be at this point. You might be you have to be the leader now for the producer that's produced the most episodes.
I think so. That makes sense.
Yeah, no doubt. I don't think it's that close.
And we love having the great Ricky Hollywood with
Mm-hmm.
us. What
longest,
a gang. What a team.
Yeah. Best,
Greg, here's a question.
Yeah.
Will we do 1,500 episodes together?
Yeah.
2,000, Wes.
Yes.
2,500, Mark Sessler.
Absolutely. I mean, what else do we have to do at this point?
3,000, old Zeuser. No.
All right.
Well, we'll see. It's been a great ride, though, boys.
That might put you at 50 years old, Dan.
It took us, what? This is 6 years? So,
longer than that. 7, right? 2013 to 20.
7 plus, yeah.
So that's, that would
8?
be 21 years. Yeah, we started in July, so we're coming up on, it'll be 7 years
14,
in July.
15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Yep, 7 years.
I mean, let's be real here. We are the demographic people are searching for right now. So, I mean, another 7 years feels like an easy yes.
Well, now that I've aged out of my 30s, now it's just a bunch of 40-something white bros. So we are getting to the point like Oliver from Brady Bunch or the little ginger boy from Different Strokes, and even listen to my pop culture references, where we need to bring in someone younger, someone who looks different than us, just to keep the show fresh. So that's something to think about. Maybe that's Erica. Maybe that's what Erica's role ultimately is, to give us that flavor, and maybe we need more to keep thriving.
Or they just, replace us en masse, like with 4, late 20s, people.
Oh yeah, that could happen as well.
It's a perilous reality.
That is funny. Me setting that up with you guys as if we might have the ultimate decision how long this goes.
We will not.
I
mean, if you can wipe out the Chicago Bulls, and I finally dove into that series, and it's amazing, as you've all mentioned. I mean, if you can wipe those guys out, 4 white guys on a podcast feels killable.
And you know what? I don't think there's a Jerry Krause type figure upstairs in our company right now, but it's only a matter of time before a Krause rolls in, and we might roll out.
I feel like we survived a couple Krauses over the years.
Oh, we have. We've survived sub-Krauses.
Yes.
Anyway, yes. So if this is indeed 1,000, and if it's not, it's got to be close. But according to one thing we saw, it is great to be around. And we got so many people reached out to us and said they've been a listener since the first show. So we've gotten many, many listeners that have said they re-listen to shows. They play the ATN Podcast Roulette, where they just pick a show from a random year and re-listen. So we are so happy to have you guys along for the ride with us. But now we spin forward. Today's show. Took a nice a Monday off after the draft. That was nice. But now it's back to work. And we are going to, now that the draft is in the rearview mirror, teams might think they've found solutions, that they've solved all their issues. But the reality of the situation is that there are unsolved mysteries connected to the NFL in the post-draft landscape. I would, if I could, if we had the technology, reanimate, what was his name? What was the host? Robert Stack.
Yeah.
Put him on the show.
Oh, yeah.
I'd also like him to take a deep, lengthy look into where the two Patriots ball boys are at this point. No one's heard from them in years.
Great ep
And I
idea.
believe they're not above ground.
Great ep idea. Reboot, baby. All right. But before that, let's get caught up on some news. 1,000, baby.
Hanses man, Greg at home, Wes is on the telephone, Sessler in his motel room, podcast happening over Zoom, Ricky's still behind the glass, heroes can't stop kicking ass, world outside is burning down, least it's not the Cleveland Browns, they'll never stop the podcast, nor the tracks keep turning while the world is burning.
Beautiful. Beautiful composition about the show from an Irish listener, Mark Sessler, his name.
Hugh O'Connor. Number one, I think we all thought that was an amazing job. I reached out to him just to get the videos for our show and stuff. And, I mean, he also couldn't be a nicer guy who is a longtime listener. And I think the lyrics, I had a few friends listen to that. They thought the lyrics just from wire to wire were perfect.
Let's play that whole song in full at the end of today's show. Hugh O'Connor, shout out. You are to me better than Billy Joel, but that's not a high bar. The old Zeus.
Wow.
All right, let's get into the news. What, we got Billy Joel fans in the house?
I mean, I think there's respect that should be paid to the catalog he's produced over
I'm
the years.
with Wes on that a little bit. Come on.
I know Greg feels way differently and despises Billy Joel's music.
I heard a lot of it. It was too much of it. It's just one of those guys your parents always played that you got absolutely sick of. So it's not really Billy Joel's fault. It's Tom and Debbie Rosenthal's fault.
He's of a time and place. I don't think his music translates to the 21st century.
See, you just buried him worse than I did.
He thought he was safe with you, and you shot an arrow through him.
I respect what he put out in the 80s.
Yeah,
it was great at the time. I
love the band Europe, but they don't really translate anymore. You know,
I think it explains why younger guys like Greg and Dan, who maybe were too young to listen to some of his best stuff early on and heard it second or third hand.
Interesting.
Yeah,
I did love We Didn't Start the Fire when I was 9. I thought that was the greatest composition by anyone ever. And then Hugh O'Connor topped it 30 years later. All right, let's get into it. Jameis Winston has a job, or it looks like it's heading that way. This is not official yet, correct?
He has not signed officially.
Which makes me wonder a little bit what's going on.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yahoo Sports' Charles Robinson reports that New Orleans is finalizing a 1-year deal with Winston, the former Buck, coming off a 5,109-yard season, 30-plus touchdowns, 30 interceptions. And immediately eyebrows raised, the idea that Winston would stay in the division, go to the Saints, back up Drew Brees. He enters the mix with Taysom Hill, who is supposed to be, and maybe still is, the heir apparent to Brees. So it just leads to a lot of unsolved mysteries in its own right. Greg, your thoughts when you heard the news that Winston may be, and quite possibly is, headed to the Saints?
I wasn't shocked because I did this hashtag.
A rare setup into your own comment with a big.
Wait, what? What did?
You made your Greg sound effect that you often.
I got it.
I wasn't going to say anything, but then Mark reacted to it, and I couldn't help myself. But go ahead. Sorry.
I did this Saints Twitter podcast, which is our boy Dat Boy Wolf has a podcast. Him and my buddy Adam, and they were saying they were hearing this was going to happen before the draft, so they got sources on the inside.
Damn.
And they ended up being proven right, and it makes all the sense in the world if you're Jameis Winston, and it makes sense if you're the Saints too. I think you get a chance to get Jameis Winston in the building for a year, probably Drew Brees' last year. We haven't heard any financial terms. The Jameis Winston deal, was reported on before the Taysom Hill extension came out, and the money that was involved in that extension came out. So part of me does wonder, is this deal for absolute sure? Did Winston know about that before he came to terms? But either way, he should do the deal, because if he can somehow impress Sean Payton, or if he can end up getting in the lineup and being his backup like Teddy Bridgewater, what better place to possibly learn? Because Jameis Winston still has a lot to learn, but he also has a lot of talent. A guy that throws for 5,000 yards can do things in the NFL, and there's no better place to learn other than under Drew Brees and Sean Payton.
So along with this, Taysom Hill gets a new contract, including $16 million up front, guaranteed.
Yeah.
And I think you have to make common sense out of that. To me, the words and actions of Sean Payton over the last few years, it's obvious that he values Taysom Hill extremely high in two ways. One, as option A in the succession plan to Drew Brees. And two, for the versatility and mismatch issues he gives at several different positions: tight end, wide receiver, running back, special teams. He values that versatility more than he values Taysom Hill as a backup quarterback. But it's weird to say that that the guy you see as your option A for succession is not your backup quarterback, and I think people have had a hard time, reconciling those two ideas.
I just see it all about 2020 because this Drew Brees window is about to close, and they want to use Taysom Hill in all the ways you mentioned, Chris, and at the same time, not have to limit Taysom Hill if they've talked about a blossoming role for him. Where he gets hurt and suddenly you don't have a backup and the Saints are in super hot water. Me alone, and I understand all the issues that come along with Jameis Winston on the field. I like Jameis Winston better than Teddy Bridgewater as a backup quarterback any day of the week.
And the salary cap issue for the Saints, or the situation, is they have less than $4 million available. So that makes sense, too, that you're not signing Winston and all of a sudden you have the highest paid backup in the league on your roster or something. Winston obviously is trying to reset his value. But, Greg, you said it makes all the sense in the world for Winston. I guess that's right, but it also makes me think that you only take this job if you have no other options to be a starting quarterback in 2020. And when you look at the landscape of the league, I guess that's true.
Yeah,
so he's thinking, what should I do if I'm not going to have a chance to start? I might as well go somewhere that could reset my career and maybe kind of change everything. It's kind of whoever's giving him the help with the decision making, I think, is doing a nice job.
I mean, he knew he didn't have any chance to start 2 weeks ago, so that doesn't surprise me that those jobs are gone. So it's just figuring out which team, which actually shows you some interest. We don't know if many teams or any other than the Saints have shown any interest, would be the best spot to be a backup. And I mean, Winston has had some games against the Saints. I mean, he has put over 30 points on the Saints in some comeback victories pretty often. I have to go check the record, but I think he entered this year 500 against Drew Brees in the Saints. The Bucs have gotten the better end of that, and a lot of it is because the Saints defense can't figure out a way to stop this guy. So he's 25 years old. He's taken a step back. I think he'll be a starting quarterback in the league again, and it wouldn't shock me if he's a starting quarterback with the Saints, because Taysom Hill, the contract is really interesting. It's basically a 2-year, $21 million contract. So that's a lot. It's a lot that they didn't have to give him. He was a restricted free agent. I'm sure he was upset, and this feels almost like the first ever apology contract I've ever heard for a backup. So when they're talking to him about bringing Winston in, they said, "No, you got a big role in our team. We're going to give you $20 million to prove it, and you're going to be under contract now for 2021 for It's about $10 million a year. That's sort of in between starting quarterback and backup quarterback money. It's fascinating. I mean, I can't think of anything.
Never give out an apology contract.
I mean, I just think that's part of it. I don't think
they
wouldn't give him the money if they didn't absolutely love him and have a big role for him, like Wes said. So it does make some sense. But I also think you don't bring in Winston unless you're at least open to the idea that he could be a possible succession plan to Drew Brees too. That at least that's in the realm of possibility.
But one quick question. I mean, where I get caught up a little bit is I would imagine the Saints, after all they've said about Taysom Hill and the comparisons they've made to Steve Young, and my belief that they do see him as a legit potential heir to Drew Brees. If Drew Brees were lost for 3 games or what happened last year, don't you want to start Taysom Hill and see what you have? I mean, do we just plug and play Jameis Winston at that point? It seems like an opportunity to find out in real time what happens beyond this next season.
I think Sean Payton, in this Drew Brees window, believes Taysom Hill is too valuable to use as a backup quarterback. He's too valuable as a mismatch option on offense and all the other positions and on special teams. And that's why I wonder what will happen. At what point is he not too valuable? Like when Drew Brees retires, are you saying, okay, now we got to get a new Taysom Hill to play all those other positions, and the original Taysom Hill becomes quarterback? It's kind of
it's so weird because he has 100 career touches.
Precious,
he has 100 career touches. I mean, he has fewer career touches than a mediocre backup quarterback entering his second year. So it is a totally unique, I think, unparalleled situation. It's really crazy to me.
All right. In other interesting quarterback situations, let's head to Green Bay, where our old friend Bob McGinn, writing for The Athletic, had this to say when breaking down the Packers' suspect draft class that included trading up to take quarterback Jordan Love in the first round. According to McGinn, he believes Matt LaFleur, the Packers coach, quote, simply had enough of Rodgers' act and wanted to change the narrative. And changing the narrative and giving the Packers leverage is adding a first-round quarterback with a great skill set to the room. So, yes, if anybody thought when they were listening Thursday Night Show that we were being melodramatic about this pick and what it could mean to the Packers and what it's going to lead in terms of drama, no, this is going to be a huge story around this team, whether Packers fans like it or not.
This is fascinating to me the more I read about it. And I think it's important to point out Bob McGinn was not reporting there. He started that sentence with, my sense is this is what's going on. Brian Gutekunst, the GM, had interviews with Peter King and Albert Breer, and in both interviews made it clear this was not plan A going into the draft. They did not prioritize finding a successor for Aaron Rodgers. And what I find interesting is the original plan was to help Aaron Rodgers, to get an early round wide receiver for the first time in 6 years. Peter King in his article pointed out that since 2015, the Packers have not drafted a wide receiver in the first 3 rounds and have not signed any wide receiver for more than $5 million. The original plan was to help Rodgers. The fallback plan effectively undercuts him and perhaps even alienates him. I wonder if they can thread that needle. I mean, to me, it's a very touchy situation now.
Was it the fallback plan, though? I mean, they called the Vikings, they called all these teams in front of them to trade up. They with no good information either that any team was trading up other than, they thought maybe.
Well, they did have good information. Well, they had well, it didn't turn out to be good, but they thought it was good. They thought that the Colts were trading up.
Right. They thought, apparently incorrectly, but who knows? Teams lie after the draft and before the draft all the time, that the Colts were going to trade up for Love. But they were calling all the teams ahead of them to move. But if plan A was a receiver, and I guess, okay, you only like 4 or 5 receivers in this draft, but why not trade up for a receiver? Or Gutekunst is quoted saying, we thought, in explaining why they didn't take a receiver a little later in the draft, he said, well, we thought this was only about a 12 receiver draft. But you could have taken one of your top 5 in the first round.
The players they liked in the first round were off the board by about pick 24. That's what Gutekunst said. And there were guys they liked in the second round at wide receiver. They did try to trade up for those guys, but at that point, the 4th rounder they had to throw in for the Jordan Love trade would have been valuable to trade up, and they didn't have that option available.
I would say this. I mean, Bob McGinn is not reporting this, as you mentioned, the way he worded this, but I'm not sure there's anyone I trust more to put little droplets of background information and intelligence and just a vibe of what's happening in Green Bay. And when I hear Matt LaFleur say Aaron Rodgers is our quarterback for years to come, well, that would be frankly unusual with the way that they've set the table here, because that just doesn't happen that often. Now, you've got Tom Brady and Jimmy G in that situation, and Aaron Rodgers should be looked at in the same esteem, that maybe he shouldn't feel threatened at all. But, it's the person of Aaron Rodgers and the overall experience of Aaron Rodgers that seems to have threatened Matt LaFleur to some degree. I don't know if threaten is the right word, but it's an uncomfortable relationship after we spent all of last year wondering if they could work together, and it went off without a hitch for the most part. I wonder now, honestly, I think it is a coin flip that Aaron Rodgers is on the Packers roster a year from now. That's the way I'd see it at this point, because these things have a way to snowball and move more rapidly than one would wish, that a Packers fan would wish.
We had the power rankings came out this week, and I did a show with our producer, Matt Tanton, a buddy of ours, and our left fielder / pitcher, Wes, on the Shield. And he's a big Bears fan. And he was floating the idea that he can't wait for the Aaron Rodgers revenge tour with Rodgers in Chicago with the Bears a year from now. And he said it as like an excited Bear fan. You say stop, but
well, how are they they're going to trade him to the Bears? Please, that is not the team they're going to give him.
Listen, just keep an open mind. And when you think about Aaron Rodgers, is there any player that you've ever can name or think of that is more suited for a revenge tour where he decides that a team is out to get him and he now wants to vanquish them and teach them that they were wrong because I'm Aaron Rodgers and I'm the best? This feels destined, like in the stars, that Rodgers will have this chapter in his career. And this I mean, you couldn't picture a bigger step toward that than what happened this past week.
I only say please because of the Bears, because they have him under contract for 4 more years, and he'd be very expensive.
Maybe he'll go to the Jets for a year,
right? In the next 2 years. So you figure if they got rid of him, it's probably going to be via trade. But I thought it was interesting. David Bakhtiari, who was live. Man, was it on our draftathon?
It was draftathon.
Okay, so
yes,
you can still donate to the draftathon because it had such good info from David Bakhtiari, who was on live and saying he thought it was going to fire up Aaron Rodgers. He thought that this was going to put a little extra in him. And when McGinn wrote that Rodgers' attitude was imperial. Oh, what a choice of word. That the Packers would gain leverage with their, quote, imperial quarterback and his passive-aggressive style, because you heard Gutekunst talk after the draft too. They wanted to transition more into like a running team, and that was what the agent and that they don't want to hear any honking from Rodgers or anything. If I'm reading the tea leaves here about we're going to be a running team, okay, well we'll get rid of you in a year if you're going to complain.
Well, and to emphasize that it's so weird that this could have gone the way that Aaron Rodgers ends up with a wide receiver and he's happy. Instead, they get the biggest running back to come out of the draft in a few years, a power back, and Gutekunst says his head coach wants to tie everything to the run game. Even if they don't draft another quarterback, that is undercutting what Aaron Rodgers thinks of his role as the quarterback. He thinks that he goes up to the line of scrimmage and decides what they're going to do.
It's worth noting, they drafted Brett Favre and he started playing better than ever, and they almost made it back to the Super Bowl. That was 3 years more of Brett Favre. Jimmy Garoppolo, they drafted in 2014. I know it was 1 round later, but that's a 2nd round pick. They won 3 more Super Bowls after that. Brady was around the same age. So I think there is a route here where Rodgers just plays his brains out and ends up being the guy for a while. That's at least possible.
Sure.
You love fresh storylines. Chum that water.
Well, it's fresh, but it's not going to be fresh when we're still discussing this in late July.
What about the report out there that this season they could still hypothetically have a 16-game season that would start October 15th? What would we do in September and October? Do you remember how miserable we are every August at the end of the month talking about the same things over and over again? What would happen if that extended another 45 days?
I am not worried about this group filling up 45 to 50 minutes. Even if we were on the dark side of planet Saturn, we'd find a way to discuss something.
I'm just saying, you're going to be talking about whatever you were think of. Every year September 1st. Think about doing that again for another 45 days.
I mean, there's times that we've taken topics and forbid them from being discussed. I think we would just have to broaden the bans on a wide variety of discussion points that have become hyper stale.
Let's hope it doesn't get to that. That's what's happening in the news. All right.
Poor James Devlin just kicked right out of the old news.
I knew
Bye-bye, James. It was a good run,
I mean, have we ever done a news item on a fullback retiring?
No, it's fine. It's fine.
When Rosie Nix goes out.
Oh,
Made the Patriots all-decade team, which will soon be announced.
Wow, what competition at the fullback position?
Well, I'm
Anyways.
just saying. You made it.
The Patriots might come up again, Greg, so you'll get your chance
Okay, good.
if you want to wax on.
No,
Devlin's
it was
career.
fine. I mean, Bill Belichick's guy. That's probably his number one favorite player he ever drafted.
All right, it is time now. Yes, teams think they have solved their roster woes, but there are still unsolved mysteries. Unsolved mysteries. You would walk down the steps of like a city library in a long trench coat stack. And then there'd be fog rolling in. He just looked about the creepiest man there's ever been.
Well,
Check
he
it out on
reported on
Amazon.
some-
Until you cosplayed him on our TV show earlier this year.
Yes, apparently I'm the biggest Robert Stack fan there is. He's also excellent in a comedic role in Airplane.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Throw that
Good
out there
call.
as well.
Forgot that.
All right. So, this is a recurring segment on the show. It's fairly simple. We're going to take turns pointing out something connected to a team that feels like a loose end at this stage of the calendar. And since I mentioned the Patriots and I have them on my list, why don't I get going here with an unsolved mystery surrounding the New England Patriots? Bill Belichick had a very Bill Belichickian draft. We know that by now. He traded out of the first round. He took a D2 safety with the first pick. And he completely, most notably, in my opinion, ignored the quarterbacks of the college game, which leads people to believe that Jarrett Stidham, last year's fourth-round pick, and Brian Hoyer, the backup, are the guts of that QB room. Here's the unsolved mystery. Will another shoe be dropping? Or is this really what this is going to be? And knowing the people involved here, I would not be surprised if this is how it plays out, just because Belichick doesn't want to do what you think he's going to do. But, and Wes, you and I are on the same page here, got to do better in that room. Unless Jarrett Stidham's the next Tom Brady. Unsolved mysteries.
I don't know. I've read that they, okay, you want to find out what you have in Jarrett Stidham, so at that point, why does it make sense to trade a late-round pick or whatever for Andy Dalton? Why do you need 16 games to see what you have in Jarrett Stidham? I don't think you need a whole season to experiment with a guy who was a fourth-round draft pick. To me, I don't know, 1 month worth of games is enough to know whether you've got the right guy or not. I just don't buy that as the reason.
Well, I think you got to trust the actions at some point. I'm not saying they would be closed off to the quarterbacks. Okay, let's start with the draft pick. Like going into, when they did those mocks before the 2018 college season and they did, fake mocks in September. Jarrett Stidham was supposed to be a top 10 to 15 pick. So if he had come out as a junior, a lot of people thought he probably would have been late first, maybe mid-second. If he happened to have been let's put that at the end of it, a mid-second, late second, maybe we feel a little differently about him as like a prospect that they can believe in. They've got to watch him for a year. And I think there's no way that they would have done what they've done this offseason unless they're just comfortable with him being their starter. I do think it's worth noting Brian Hoyer is only making $1 million, which would make him like the lowest paid veteran backup in the league. So they have extra room to add someone at some point, and I think they will. I don't think it's someone that necessarily is competing with Jarrett Stidham, and I don't think it's necessarily Andy Dalton unless he came at an incredibly cheap price. But I mean, Hoyer's making nothing, and even if Stidham is the favorite to start week 1, which I think he's going to be, I would expect them to add someone. I think someone will be added to that room.
I just look at their actions too. I mean, one little thing on Dalton. If I'm the Bengals, and there have been messier quarterback team scenarios than Dalton and the Bengals, I'm not sure I want to move him at this point. I mean, what is the worst thing about right? I mean, there have been some reporting that the Bengals are open to keeping Andy Dalton, and he'd be certainly more generous to incoming quarterback than some veterans we can think of. And there's just nothing about the Patriots chasing after any of these signal callers that we keep wanting to link them with. I mean, there's just no buzz around it on any level.
But that's also they're pretty buzz-proof building many times.
They are, but I mean,
you never know.
You know, something would leak out if they were fascinated with Andy Dalton or Cam Newton. I just feel like we'd have a little tiny tidbit of info suggesting
perhaps.
Or they did something about it. But to your point, with it, in terms of it being a mystery, if we hit late August and no one wants Cam Newton still, and he's out there for almost nothing, I mean, to me, then that changes the equation. It's different than being aggressive.
Or you get to camp and Stidham is a total dolt. I mean, then maybe you make a move.
I mean, they've had him in the building. They watched him play 100 times in practice or whatever it is, and they obviously like him a lot.
I kind of remember him stinking out the joint against the Jets in the preseason. What if, Stidham is their guy, and then he plays really poorly all through the summer? I mean,
he had a solid preseason. It wasn't like unbelievable. It was easily the best rookie preseason they've ever had out of a quarterback, but it was a lot of dinking and dunking.
Right.
I mean, Dan, if I were you, I'd just keep this tamper down. You want him playing against the Jets in the regular season.
I also don't want them going 3-13 and getting Trevor Lawrence next April. So it's tough sitch. All right, Mark, you're up.
You know, for me, I'm trying to think of a coach who left on worse terms, went into the wilderness, and had one of the more inconceivably hyped up PR campaigns about his return than Mike McCarthy. And we're told that Mike McCarthy is a completely new human being, that, by watching tape during his year away from football, he's learned so much, despite the fact that he was a coach for 25 plus years before that. And that he's a perfect fit for the Cowboys. And my question is, because it is a mystery to me, is how much has Mike McCarthy actually changed? Because there are two versions of Mike McCarthy you get. A is this one that we're told has completely had a come-to-Jesus moment and sees offensive football in a completely different way. Or B, the one who basically lost that power clash with Aaron Rodgers, unlike Matt LaFleur at this point, and basically rode himself out of town on an offense that when he was last coaching, was viewed as archaic, unmoving, unable to change with the times the way that teams in the NFC were. So, you've kept Kellen Moore. I like that as a first move to say maybe we marry what the Cowboys do well, and we marry a little bit of what Mike McCarthy feels at home with. Want to see that. I wouldn't keep Kellen Moore unless you wanted to use some of his ingenuity. I thought that, for a time last year, he roamed as the coordinator of the year material until some of the wheels fell off. You've got no end to the talent on that offense. And there are no excuses for Mike McCarthy. He's not taking over some sort of broken down 2-14 team with a long leash. You've got Jerry Jones adding CeeDee Lamb to a totally stocked wide receiver room. I just wonder, will we get Mike McCarthy in a way we've never experienced, or the same old thing?
Isn't there something to be said that Mike McCarthy was viewed as the boogeyman in Green Bay, and then he gets dumped, and then they bring in a kid to be the new head coach, a bearded boy, and now that bearded boy was just behind drafting a first-round quarterback because Aaron Rodgers had become a pain in the ass, and maybe is part of the reason that offense isn't as good anymore. I'm not defending McCarthy. I just find it interesting that McCarthy was viewed as the problem, capital T, capital P, and then the offense stayed kind of blah last season after he left.
They also won 6 or 7 more games or whatever it was.
But he'd done that before. I mean, he had a great. I think at the end of Green Bay was not great, but he had a great run there when he had, I think, 8 wins of 10-plus games over 11 years. Maybe he got old. I get that side of it.
I think there's some reason to believe that he's going to let Kellen Moore be Kellen Moore, and that he's going to be more of kind of a executive type coach. That's what he said. I mean, Kellen Moore is going to call the plays. And there was some talk that Garrett kind of stepped in, and people wanted to blame Garrett for why the offense got a little more conservative under Kellen Moore down the stretch. Maybe McCarthy, him turning the new leaf, is kind of letting Kellen Moore fly.
I would ask you this, though. So they hired Mike McCarthy to play executive role, not because of Mike McCarthy's offensive playbook or ingenuity. That alone would be
That would make
Why
sense
hire
to me
Mike
because I think
McCarthy?
that was his strength. His plays were not his strength. His strength, I thought, was kind of an organizational cohesion. Like he was an adult leading the room who hired good people who kind of seemed to work well and like he always seemed good at that part of the job. His play calling, he was fine.
What do you think, Wes?
What to your point, Dan? I think we all kind of by all of us. I mean, the cognoscenti we bought the storyline that McCarthy's offense had grown stale, and that's the reason why he left. That's the reason why he was pushed out. The relationship with Rodgers didn't work anymore because McCarthy's offense had grown stale. If you're reading between the lines on Bob McGinn, and if you're watching Rodgers play, we talked about it at the end of last year when I was saying, look at all these plays he's passing up because he wants to make the spectacular play. Maybe the truth is a lot closer to both of them were at fault. Maybe the offense did grow stale, but maybe it wasn't working because Aaron Rodgers wouldn't work with the offense. And when you hear guys like James Jones, who played quite a few years under McCarthy, say nothing but great things about him and say, of course, the Cowboys got a great coach, to me, maybe we should shift away from the narrative that McCarthy only left Green Bay because his offense was stale.
All right.
fair.
Chris Wessling, you're up.
Albert Breer did a really nice job on his post-draft column looking at the quarterbacks and why they were chosen and what people liked about them. When I read the Joe Burrow piece, I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm too gaga over this guy, but it feels like it's about to be cool to be a Bengals fan again.
Woo-wee.
And I can't remember ever thinking that it's going to be cool, and this guy's going to save Zach Taylor's job. That's the sense I get, that he is so beloved by his teammates and everybody in every building he's been in. He's a natural leader. He has the mind that you want in a quarterback and the personality you want in a quarterback. If he's going to save Zach Taylor's job, to me, the unsolved mystery is Zach Taylor a good coach? What are we going to find out about Zach Taylor's coaching ability through Joe Burrow?
Yeah,
Well,
what did
Wes,
we learn last year?
I had a very similar mystery about Zach Taylor. They have a OC and DC who are both with 1 year of experience at that role. And Zach Taylor, I mean, number one, I love that they didn't fire him because I don't like these one-and-done situations when they were dealing with a lot last year. But I cannot imagine or remember a first-year coach that, went and coached 16 games and came out with less of an identity. I have no concept of who Zach Taylor is or what the coaching philosophy is in Cincinnati at all. Now, that could change entirely, but I'm totally with you on that being an unsolved mystery.
Now he has a chance. And not just a chance, like he is set up pretty well. And I like their draft because I like the idea of, it turns out now, at the time a few months ago, it felt like Bengals being Bengals. But now the idea that A.J. Green is there makes a ton of sense. And it gets you even more excited because he is potentially back to his old self. And now you have T. Higgins, who they took in the first pick of the second round, another explosive receiver. So you're lined up really well at wide receiver. If this guy can play, and you get the offensive lineman back that didn't even play a snap last year, there's a real chance that they become one of those teams, and it happens every once in a while. It goes from 2-14 to playoff contender in December. I would not be stunned if they're hanging around in the AFC, especially with an extra playoff spot.
To me, quarterbacks, for the most part, make coaches, not the other way around. And Burrow, I mean, there was some negativity about his arm strength and is he like a rich man's Alex Smith or Andy Dalton? It's like, give me a break when you look at his athleticism. The 3rd and 17 play he makes against Texas early in the year where there's 3 or 4 clear rushers coming at him, and he moves in the pocket and makes a ridiculous throw on the move, which saves their undefeated season. They maybe don't win that game. That's the type of next level quarterbacking you can't teach. And Alex Smith and Andy Dalton, they don't got that. This guy can make Zach Taylor, look a lot better than Zach Taylor is.
Well, it's been a long time now, but I remember Greg specifically liking what he heard from Zach Taylor last year coming out of all the press conferences.
I think publicly he does a really good job still, and I even think that now when I watch him in these interviews.
And we were really impressed with him in week 1 when they went into Seattle and almost upset the Seahawks. And then after that, everybody got injured and they went months without winning a game.
Well, I would just say this, though. You've got guys like Brian Flores, too, who were given absolutely nothing to work with. And we're coming out of that season thinking that Brian Flores is a huge asset. And I'm glad they kept Zach Taylor. It would have been unfair to remove him.
They were competitive,
though.
They led 10 games, which I think is an NFL record, to only get 2 wins in the second half. So they weren't like a terror, as 2-14 teams go. Or did they win 2 or 1? I can't even remember.
I think it was 2. I kind of. It's funny you brought up Brian Flores. To me, he's in the same boat on kind of the opposite end, where you know nothing about Zach Taylor, who had a terrible roster and injuries and went 2-14. Flores was very publicly being set up that this is the worst roster perhaps ever. And then by getting to the 5 wins with the strong finish, he looks like a coach that's going to be there for a decade. But now he has a big test ahead of him now, which is actually some expectations. And going 5-11 is not going to be drawing a parade anymore. So it's tough business being a head coach in the league. And I don't think anybody's safe. That year 2 is going to be big for both of those guys. Greg, you're up.
All right. Like Colleen Wolfe sometimes, I'm not sure I totally understood this exercise because my unsolved mystery
segment like 12 times.
Well, I didn't know it had to be team specific, but I think this works because to me, we're living in an unsolved mystery. I mean, the world.
That's a good lyric.
The world is
living in an unsolved mystery.
I'm waiting for that music to come in. The world is an unsolved mystery.
Wake up, Ricky.
Right now,
not all of us
but
get
how
this
it
music, by the
relates
way.
to the NFL.
The unsolved mystery is what happened to Erica on the podcast.
How it relates to the NFL, at least to start, I'm going to start with is I'm really interested, and I know this sounds weird, about this whole supplemental draft.
It's such a Greg.
I know this sounds crazy, but I really think we're living in this fascinating time. College football, there's a good chance it's not going to be played in the fall because schools are going to have to be back. I mean, our California governor said he did not expect anyone to attend any sporty events until there's some therapeutic treatment. Maybe that'll pop up. Who knows? If there's no college football in the fall and there's not going to be much information out in the next month or two before players have to decide, are 70 players going to come out in this supplemental draft? Is it going to be a totally different experience than any supplemental draft in history? Because if you're at Missouri right now and you were a borderline 3rd round pick, and you were thinking of coming out, but you thought, no, let's go back to school one more year, try to bump that up. What is the point of going back to college? There might not be a college to go back to. There might not be college football to go back to, and you could go start your NFL career and earn a living. It's going to be tricky to decide who can make it and who doesn't. But I feel like it's something. It could be this wave that's going to happen, and it's going to give us something to talk about. Maybe I'm totally wrong, but we might be doing some supplemental draft
I don't think
special
you're wrong.
2 months from now.
They've talked. This has been out there that supplemental draft could be a huge option for people. And there is, when they go through the potential scenarios for college football, there's one where yes, you don't have the autumn because it's different than the pros. You don't just go play in an empty stadium.
Less
they want
usage.
Students in back at school for this to happen. So there's a world where maybe college football, the season begins in February, they've said. Well, that's completely ridiculous with the NFL calendar. I mean, that's fine for the idea of college football games being played, but if you're looking at the draft versus just playing out your senior season and becoming an accountant, well, you don't play that season. You don't get hurt 2 months before the draft, and it just seems completely unfeasible to me. And I think that there's got to be agents talking to certain prospects and players saying, supplemental draft may be your best chance to maximize a draft pick.
Handsome Hank might have to farm out his supplemental mock draft this year if that goes on.
He might have to bring Jeremiah back from break. I guess he's not going anywhere this year, so it's all right, DJ.
I know someone that can do a mock
We're
draft.
doing path to the supplemental draft for 3 weeks. Get ready.
Well, what happens if there's no college season and then the 2021 NFL draft?
Right. I mean,
I just want the Yankees back.
Well, good luck with that.
We're living in an unsolved mystery. Are humans soon to be history? Who's got the next line?
It's so clear for all of us to see. That's the next line.
So clear for all of us to see.
Bad line.
That we're living in an unsolved mystery. All right.
We're swimming in a pool of pee. Now that is how you close out.
Pool of pee. All right.
That's a lyric.
Not exactly Bob Dylan.
Do you want to do one more speed round, real quick? Anybody got any in the chamber?
I had one ready, but I don't need to.
Why don't we not even give? We don't even need to like dig in. Let's just run some music, Ricky, and then everybody take turns until you run out.
Okay.
I'll go first. Where the hell is Jadeveon Clowney going? Seattle took 2 Leo type guys.
So this is a true speed round. I'll throw one out there.
Yeah, go.
I want to know who Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold are. I'd be concerned if they flop this year that both those teams might quietly start looking elsewhere.
I want to know the day the NFL season starts and the structure of that regular season.
Are Cam Newton's days as a franchise quarterback over?
Oof. Have the Lions ended the curse of Barry Sanders, DeAndre Swift? I'm out.
Will Kyle Shanahan let Jimmy Garoppolo throw the ball more than 5 yards down the field this season?
How about this? Is Matt Nagy an NFL head coach or someone pretending to be an NFL head coach?
Out of the draft.
You've decided that Nick Foles is where you're going this season. Good luck with that one.
The Eagles were cool with that once upon a time. All right, looks like we're fresh out. Did you know that Reggie, remember when Reggie ran for 1,006 yards and then bought everybody on the team those scooters in Detroit? That was the last
Reggie Bush?
Reggie Bush, our old friend.
Okay.
That was the last Lions 1,000-yard rusher. 2013, 1,006 yards. And the Lions have ranked in the bottom half of the NFL in rushing in every season since Barry Sanders retired after the 98 campaign.
Well, and they went into last year wanting to be a run-oriented offense and finished 30th.
Remember,
Wes, who led the Lions in rushing with 403 yards last year?
Kerryon Johnson?
Correct. He still got it, folks.
Don't forget about the
Wes Hills?
Scarborough heads.
remember when Reggie lost 7 yards on a pitch play in Buffalo and ended up negative yards for the season?
That's how his career ended, I think.
Yeah, sorry.
Remember when he was on our show for 5 straight weeks and then he disappeared and we never saw him again?
Didn't that happen
Twitter
to Barry
show.
Sanders?
He
when
says
ran
he
for
drives
2,000?
around Santa Monica in a golf cart all the time, but I have never once seen that golf cart. Maybe it's maybe it's a nicer part of Santa Monica than I know.
Mark, I think Barry Sanders, I think that's where you go. I think he had a negative game in the playoffs against the Packers.
Well, I thought that he crossed 2,000, then got stuffed for a loss and went under 2,000 and then got back over 2,000.
I don't think so.
But that's
because he had I remember it was against the Jets and it was about a 60-yard run that put him well over. But I could be wrong. Who knows? Another unsolved mystery. All right.
I have an unsolved conundrum for you guys.
All right. Hit it, Ricky.
So my neighbors on one side are the happy hour neighbors. They're great. This older couple, they're very nice. On the other side was the black sheep of the neighborhood. They moved out. Nobody ever talked to them because when they came in, they just decided they weren't going to be friendly with anyone. So a new neighbor moved in, and this is the nicest house in the block. We have the smallest house in the block. The new neighbor told me he was coming from Playa del Rey, where he had the highest house with the best ocean view in all of Playa del Rey. So the guy's got plenty of guap, right? Mm-hmm. He's a really nice guy. We've been trying to figure out, what he does, who he is. The other neighbors tell us yesterday he's a writer, and I know his first name. So it kind of jogged something in me, and I looked it up, and I don't want to ruin his privacy or anything, so I'm not going to say who he is, but I've read one of his books. He's written multiple bestsellers that have turned into blockbuster movies. You guys would know who his name is. Now, in order to have a normal, friendly, neighborly relationship, should I ever let on that I know who he is and I've read his books, or should I just say nothing about it?
So your neighbor is John Grisham.
I'd say he's sub John Grisham on the celebrity scale.
But
a better writer.
Absolutely. honesty is the best policy. Why not? I mean, what writer doesn't like hearing that you like his book?
But there's a fine line between like fanboying out on him.
Well, you don't need to fanboy, but it's weirder. It's more of a fanboy to like go out of your way to not be real with him. When Chris Wesling's one of the more most real guys I know.
Yeah, you don't have a fanboy DNA. Do you really? Like, I think you're gonna it's about how you'd handle it versus withholding your knowledge of him, and I think you'd handle it pretty well. I maybe wouldn't roll over there after 22 beers or something, but have the first meeting be real nice.
This is where the big green egg comes in handy for Stephen King and Chris Wesley.
Brad Thor.
Not Stephen King.
You and Charlie Kaufman. Is he a screenwriter or an author?
He said it's been turned into movies. You and Michael Chabon, just kicking back in the old neighborhood.
Of that ilk. I'd say a better writer than him, though.
Michael Crichton?
I mean, that's a Pulitzer Prize winner there.
Interesting, okay.
You're saying he's better than, so that's,
I don't know.
That's high praise.
Maybe that's my own personal bias, but
all right.
When I read this guy's first work, which came out like 15 years ago, I remember thinking for that genre, for like the thriller genre, the literature is fantastic.
Ooh, you just dropped a breadcrumb for the audience.
Okay. There you go.
Don Winslow.
Also from the Northeast, but now lives in Los Angeles, obviously.
He's not going to be happy when there's 7 people outside his house. Chris Wessling sent us.
Well, they'd have to figure out where I live first.
All right. That's good. Nice
good
little
advice.
Unsolved Mystery there.
All right.
All right. Let us know who you think it is, I guess. But don't get it right. I like it. All right. That's it. We'll be back on Thursday with it's our third show of the week. The Saturday show went up late. Really, it was a Sunday show. And then I believe, gentlemen, we'll get back onto our normal off-season schedule. We do Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Is that what we're doing?
Yeah,
I think so.
Yeah, that's the plan.
So that's the plan. And this was indeed our 1000th episode. Good stuff. And thank you, everybody. And remember, a reminder, for more information, resources, and details on how to support nonprofits providing relief for those significantly impacted by COVID-19 pandemic, visit nfl.com/relief. Greg will match every dollar donated by ATN listeners. Nice
job, Greg.
He's got that Comedy Central guap.
That's right. Not for much longer, but there we go.
Wait, are you breaking something here?
Well, if you're gonna add, the last episode of season 2 of the Jesselnick and Rosenthal Vanity Project goes up on Wednesday. And listeners of the show will not be surprised. I don't know if there's going to be a season 3 at Comedy Central. Might have to go elsewhere. We'll see.
Cliffhanger.
Eric,
there's an unsolved mystery.
Yeah,
Eric, you're the producer of that program.
Yeah.
Do you think you've produced your last episode of the JRVP podcast?
Yeah, I think this is it.
No worries on. I would say very little concern that it would be the last episode, but it
might be the last with.
Might be the last with Comedy Central. Yes.
Okay. Well, there's another unsolved mystery, and as promised, we will go out today with the great Hugh O'Connor, who authored up. Really, let's call it a celebration of the 1000th episode, a parody of Billy Joel, the ever overrated Billy Joel. We didn't start the fire. His version, Hugh O'Connor's version, dedicated to the Around the NFL podcast. Take it away, Hugh.
Kansas man, Greg at home. Wes is on the telephone. Sessler in his motel room. Podcast happening over Zoom. Ricky still behind the glass. Heroes can't stop kicking ass. World outside is burning down. At least it's not the Cleveland Browns. They'll never stop the podcast. No, the tracks keep turning while the world is burning. They'll never stop the podcast. Yeah, despite the warning, they just keep recording. Dang it, stories triple source. Greg is on the tennis courts. West knows football history. Mark's a man of mystery. What's more likely, sandwich props? Time to bring on Connie Fox, one of ATN's best friends. She will give us odds and ends. Picking team of ATL. It's Orson Welles. Colts are Wes's underdog. What's your favorite type of frog? They'll never top the podcast. No, the tracks keep turning while the world is burning. They'll never stop the podcast. Zeus are in the morning despite all the warning. Check in with the throne of sleaze. Brady's gone, so Greg is pleased. Mark supports the Cleveland Browns. Wes has left his Midwest town. Dan is hopeful for gangrene. Could they beat his Greybeards team? Spends more time in Kicker Club. Kaya's Kaya, there's the rub. When the world is looking bleak, these guys give 5 shows a week, killing it most every day. What else do I have to say? They'll never stop the podcast. No, the tracks keep turning while the world is burning. They'll never stop the podcast. When the world hits zeros, we've still got our heroes. They'll never stop the podcast. No, the tracks keep turning while the world is burning. They'll never stop the podcast. When the world hits zeros, we've still got our heroes.